Yes, this is good. Good afternoon, everybody. While the ushers are passing a few things out, why don't we get started? My name is Dan Koch. I'm the artistic director here at Music at Lyall. We're thrilled to have the chamber music, the Lotus Chamber Music Collective here this afternoon. They have a really wonderful program, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. Few other events coming up this year. December 9th is the Millbrook Community Festival Christmas Choir Concert. That's at 7 o'clock here. And then the following week, December 16th, also at 7 o'clock, will be a presentation of my original nativity song cycle that we've done a couple years in a row now. In your programs, tucked in, you'll find 2 sheets of paper. One has the biographies of everybody you're going to hear playing today, and the second is just a little survey. If you don't mind, just take a minute or two. Everyone should have some pencils in the pews somewhere. Just try to figure out how people are hearing about us. Maybe it's word of mouth, maybe it's online. If you wouldn't mind just answering that question. If you'd like to be put on an email list, we'll let you know when upcoming events are. We won't bother you too much. We'll just send you an email letting you know what's going on every once in a while. You can provide your name and email address. And if you'd like to get involved with us, we're always looking for various help. Could be anything from graphic design to singing in the choir or as musicians. So if anything on there strikes your fancy, please go ahead and put your information down. If you choose to do that, you could just leave the sheet right in the pew at the end of the concert, and we'll pick them up when we're done. Immediately following the concert, we're going to go in the back room, and we'll have a bit of a reception with some goodies, and you'll get a chance to talk with the performers. I think that's about it. The Lotus Chamber Music Collective. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sasha Ono, and I'm the cellist today, and I also founded this group, the Lotus Chamber Music Collective, and it's a roster of professional musicians whom I really admire and who I love playing with. I found, there's really nothing better than getting to play music with your friends and people who you know and can have lots of fun with. And I think it makes it even more enjoyable and fun to listen to when the people on stage are having fun. In my experience as a classical musician, I found a lot of concerts to be kind of nerve-wracking, even from the audience perspective, or when to clap, when to stand. There's lots of different formalities, and this collective was an effort to kind of dispel a lot of that anxiousness and formality that happens a lot in classical music. So you guys can relax. Everyone can relax. So if you feel the need to stretch in the middle of the concert, please don't feel like self-conscious, like you can't breathe or stretch your legs, take a walk. So I'll introduce the musicians that we have here today. This is Hafez playing the violin. Emily is also playing the violin. We used to be roommates in college. Hafez and I, we also went to college together. Not roommates. And this is Danny, and we met playing chamber music with one of our friends. Right? So we'll explain about the cards as we go through. So this concert, the idea behind this concert was to explore identity through different pieces of music and through different components of identity. So how we think about ourselves, what we choose to prioritize in our lives, what we feel is important to us. And the first piece is by Beethoven, and this component of identity is mental and physical health. So I'll let Hafez talk about this piece.
Good afternoon. So we're playing the second movement from Opus 18, number 1, which was the first published quartet of Beethoven's. And so we picked this one because it's when Beethoven basically took over the classical genre from Mozart and Haydn, he kind of wanted to just do it his way, so, but still adhering to the rules of classical composition from before. So he takes some of his ideas and makes it his own. So in this one, it has a really somber starting point, just like most second movements would in a typical string quartet. They're usually the slow movement. So do you guys want to play the beginning part?
Yeah.
So and the way he does it is through how he composes the accompaniment. So in the beginning, the accompaniment is very simple and dry. So it's exactly like that. So it's typical of what you would expect if I was a listener going to see a quartet of Beethoven's in that era. I think, oh, this is normal. This is how it should be. Now, when the theme comes back, so normally the composition would go that and then something different, and then come back to that at the end. So you're like, oh, I know that song. Right, so when it comes back, it's slightly different. So can I hear just you guys there at measure 63? 63. So they have essentially the same thing. Okay. So basically the same thing, but what he does in the second violin is he does this. Right, so it gives it kind of like more like an anxious kind of feeling, and we decided it was kind of a parallel to Beethoven's mental health issues and physical health issues that he struggled with during his life with his deafness and things like that. So in the B section of this piece, has these violent interjections that you wouldn't think typical of a second movement. They're really just like boom in your face, and the inner voices have the melody, and it's really like intense. And then this pretty theme comes back, still with remnants of those violent interjections. So it's kind of like, when people are, as we try and live our lives, we look calm on the outside, but on the inside we're like, ah! And that's kind of how we got there.
At least that's how we are.
Right, that's how I feel. When work and stuff, it's like, I look happy, but, oh my God, what am I going to do? Right. So, yeah, is there anything else that we were talking about? Oh yeah, the green cards are the mental health and physical health cards that we want people to write on and talk about your own experiences, because we all have issues with such things where we're anxious or nervous or even more than that or less than that or whatever, and it's not always apparent to everyone else either. So.
And you don't have to write your name on
them. Yeah, we're not, okay. Cool, anything else? Oh yeah, sorry. Lastly, so this piece, he was also inspired by a scene from Romeo and Juliet. This is the tomb scene at the end, if you're familiar with that. It's when everybody dies.
Hope you enjoyed the Beethoven. The next piece we're going to play is a poem from String Quartet by Rebecca Clark. Now, Rebecca Clark was a composer in the 1900s, and she was born in Britain, and she died in New York City. She is one of the most important female composers of all time. She wrote, she was a violist, she was a violinist at first and switched to viola, and she was one of the first professional viola players to play in orchestras. And she wrote, she's very, very famous for her viola sonata, which is a staple of our repertoire. And she wrote many, many different pieces. She was not a symphonist or wrote pieces of that scale, but she wrote many small pieces for voice and piano, violin and piano, some small but beautiful pieces for viola and piano. And she wrote this piece for string quartet, which she wrote as an exercise for herself. It was supposed to be something small and simple. And as you will hear, it's no. Yes. but it is quite simple in certain ways. It's hard to explain. It's a very deep piece, and I hope that it resonates with each and every one of you as it has with us. All right.
It's very different than the Beethoven.
Very, very different.
Yeah, it's much more modern. Yeah, we have a lot of themes that pass between very themes.
Did you want to talk about her as a woman? Yes, one thing I forgot about. Orange. So the orange card is gender. And one of the things that, Rebecca Clark faced was, well, when she emigrated to the United States during the First World War, she had some trouble as a female composer. So she did write one of the pieces for viola called Morpheus under a male pseudonym because of that. And unfortunately, many of her works were not published in her lifetime, and even this work until kind of recently was in a manuscript. It was dug up by an all-female string quartet. So that's something that
that was a big obstacle.
Yeah, it's a big obstacle for her as a female composer back then. So I'm really glad that now she's better known and has paved the way for many female composers to be well known and respected.
quartet. Usually it's like a first and second violinist, but I think you just have to switch back and forth.
I'll talk into the microphone for this. Hi, I'm Emily. So the next piece we're going to play is the Dvorak, first movement of the American Quartet. So with Dvorak, we're exploring cultural identity. Dvorak, yes. We're exploring cultural identity. And so Dvorak, as many of you know, is a Czech composer. And he was really passionate about his Czech heritage, so much so that he really wanted to incorporate elements of Czech folk song into his compositions. And he actually became, in this way, one of the most prominent Czech nationalist composers after Smetana. So in that way, his cultural identity really came through. And actually, he moved to America. He moved to New York, actually, where he lived for 3 years, I believe. And in that time, his main goal was to discover kind of American music. Like, what is American music, right? And how can I use this in my compositions the same way that I did kind of the Czech folk song elements? So he actually discovered spirituals. And that became the basis between spirituals and kind of Native American music. This was his passion in merging these two things to create like a real American sound. So if you think like back to like Western movies, you know, that kind of like open sounding, very pastoral almost, this is really what you get in this piece. So maybe I'll play for you just a very brief kind of chunk of the melody, and you'll really hear the folk element of it. You want to just play like, yeah. So while they're doing it, I'll just play this very brief so you can hear kind of very folky, right? American sound. So he kind of, in his own way, created this in terms of his, like, classical music at the time was kind of devoid of that sound. So.
Me again for a quick second as they tune up. So music at Lyall, you guys don't worry about it, keep tuning, it's all good. So music at Lyall, we want to keep we like to keep absolutely no admission costs because we don't want to turn anyone away to want to come to our concerts. That being said, what helps us sustain is our donations. So during this last piece of the first act, if you will, a few people are going to come around with some plates, and if you are able to please put something in it. It just helps us sustain and keep offering these wonderful concerts. After this piece, there will be a brief intermission. During that time, you might want to go on Facebook and follow Music at Lyall on Facebook. You could also get some updates that way. And also, you can go after the concert, you can go on YouTube, look for Lyall Memorial Federated Church, and you can relive this concert experience on YouTube because we're actually live streaming right now. So enjoy the Dvorak and.
Yeah, our instruments get very temperamental when the weather changes, just like us. So it's a very cold day today.
Any little change in temperature messes with the instruments.
Yeah, actually, Danny, how old is your instrument?
My instrument is a contemporary instrument and dubbed Victor. It was actually born in 2001, so it's probably the youngest of
Yeah,
the lot
definitely.
here.
Mine says 1906.
Oh. Mine's 2002.
Mine's about like 1840s.
So you win.
Yeah.
Great-grandpa? You got grandpa?
Yeah, and actually my cello is called a lady's cello because it's a little bit smaller than a full size. instrument. So it's a 7/8. There are all these different, we're all teachers as well. So for little kids, they have very tiny instrument, violins, violas, cellos, and all the way to full size. And then mine's just a little bit smaller than a full size, 7/8 size.
At least for their instruments, they actually have an actual like model of what a full-size instrument is. This is a 16¼ inch, 41cm viola. They were originally 18 inches.
Oh, Jesus.
And they can be cut down. They're even like 14-inch violas. So there's really not. And some are cut away. Some are like amorphous and stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, you guys have real dimensions.
take a short break, and then when we come back, we'll play some Mendelssohn. And if you have written anything in your cards, right when you came in, there's this kind of this area, and you can put your cards there, and everyone can share and read them, and we'll have, yeah, lots of more music when you come back. So the second half only includes one piece. The second half only includes one piece of music. So the first half, we just played excerpts from much larger works. Usually a string quartet in its entirety is about half an hour long. And I just wanted to present little snippets of pieces so we could hear lots of different composers. It was very hard for me to decide which ones to play, so I said, why not just play a little bit of all of them? And in this half, we'll play a full string quartet by Felix Mendelssohn. So it's in 4 movements. Each movement is very distinctive. It has its own character, but they're all very connected to each other. And Mendelssohn actually wrote this piece when he was 18 years old, and he had already written quite a bit of music by that point, like his very famous violin concerto and an octet, a very Midsummer Night Dream, he had already written. And at the very young age of 18, he wrote this very advanced and dramatic piece of music. So any of you know 18-year-olds, like you might know they can feel very dramatic sometimes. So yes, I could say it also because we're all teachers as well as musicians. Hafez teaches at WestConn, teaches violin and chamber music. He recently is now professor. Yes, there's professor. And Emily teaches at the Music Cottage in Brewster. And just there. I was teaching full-time orchestra in Brewster, New York, and recently left, and now I teach for the Youth Orchestra of St. Luke's and Hell's Kitchen in Manhattan. And Danny has his own private studio, right? And he also travels to teach and teaches at other various community music schools. Okay, so some of you have this piece of paper that describes the different moods of the different movements. So I just wrote kind of what I think about when I play and listen to this piece. And it starts off with this really beautiful chorale in the very beginning, which we'll play for you in a minute. And then it's really interesting that after all of this craziness ensues in the first, second, and third movements, at the very end of the 4th movement, he brings back that chorale from the very, very beginning of the first movement, and it kind of comes full circle. This quartet has a lot of conversation that's going through it, so we'll have the melody, one person will have the melody and pass it on to other people, so it's really a challenge, but a very interesting challenge to see if you can track the melody and where it's going and who it's going to. You might notice we're moving a lot together, so there's a lot of silent communication, eye contact, and movement that we have to do because we can't, shout at each other during the piece. So, yeah. And there's space on the back of this paper if you want to write down any thoughts or do any doodles or anything, and just feel free. Just take a stretch. It's about a half hour long all the way through. Anyone else?
One of the themes from this piece is from a German song that he wrote earlier in his life. I don't want to butcher the German, but the translation is "It True?" And that's this theme that you'll hear, "Is it true?" And it's basically about a girl he liked. Those 18-year-old boys, right? It's hormones. But yeah, so that's like littered throughout the piece.
Yeah. And Mendel's, this component of identity is religion or spirituality. Mendelssohn was actually Jewish, but he felt he had to convert to Christianity because Jews were very persecuted and discriminated against at the time, and he was having a hard time getting things published and moving up in the musical world, so he converted to Christianity, and that was something that he struggled with for his whole life. Well, thank you so much for coming out on this cold fall day to hear us play some music, and hopefully you got to meet somebody new today and, had some thoughts about what's important to you and got to talk to other people. So we are some of the members from the Lotus Chamber Music Collective, and if you want to hear about more of our concerts, we have one coming up on November 7th that's at a winery. So it's dinner and a show with some singers and some string players and some really cool, actually a Duke Ellington string quartet. So there's a sign-in sheet in the back if you want to hear about some of our upcoming concerts, and we'll see you at the wonderful reception. And thank you so much to Dan for inviting us to come and play. So thank you so much, Dan, for putting it all together. Thanks so much for having us.